Chosen one, stay with me through every word, because a catastrophic miscalculation has finally reached its breaking point. The individual who obsessed over your downfall assumed that if they pressed their lies with enough force, their fabricated reality would replace the truth. Instead, the mask has slipped so completely that people are seeing them as a psycho targeting you. They can't keep up with their lies. Their manufactured version of you has crumbled, leaving only their own instability on display for everyone to witness. They came with a plan, and it was not a careless one. It was calculated. They surveyed the landscape. They identified the people in your circle whose confidence they could quietly work on. They located the angles most likely to produce doubt. They studied what would land, what would sting, what would create just enough distance between you and the people who genuinely knew you. And then, with that map in hand, they moved. In the beginning, the plan appeared to be functioning. You felt the shift in energy around you before you could explain it. Conversations that once felt open started carrying a new weight. Connections you trusted began to feel slightly cooler than usual. You noticed, and for a moment, be honest, you turned that questioning inward. You reviewed your own actions, your own words, asking yourself where the flaw was that they were supposedly uncovering. That internal questioning was exactly what they designed it to produce. They needed you looking inward, searching yourself for the crack they claimed to have found. Because a person busy questioning themselves from the inside cannot mount any meaningful defense on the outside. They were counting on that internal noise to keep you occupied while they built the external campaign. But here is the thing they did not examine carefully enough. The same level of precision they used to engineer doubt required sustained maintenance to survive. Precision cannot hold without consistency, and consistency over real time, across real people, against the ongoing reality of who you actually are, is the one thing a fabricated campaign structurally cannot deliver. The weapon they built had a flaw they had not yet looked at, and that flaw was already working against them from the moment they started. You were not their first target. That matters. The obsession that landed on you did not materialize from nowhere. It had a trail, a pattern of earlier behavior that people around them had quietly noticed and filed away, not fully understanding what they were witnessing, but registering it nonetheless. That registered data was waiting for context. It was about to receive it. They believed they were operating without a record, without witnesses, and with total control of the outcome. They were wrong on every single count. For a period, the campaign moved almost exactly as designed. The doubt was seeding, the distance was forming. The manufactured version of you was gaining traction in the circles it was aimed at. From a surface view, it would have looked like a win. It would have looked like the plan was working. But underneath that surface, something else was already in motion. Every lie told about you was landing inside the minds of real people, people with their own memories, their own prior experiences of you, their own privately stored observations they had accumulated without even realizing how much they had gathered. And as the campaign circulated, something began activating in those minds, a quiet friction, almost undetectable at first, but growing steadily with every new claim that bumped against what they already knew about you. The version they were being fed did not line up with the version they already carried. Nobody announced that contradiction. Nobody stood up and declared that the accounts did not match. The friction expressed itself more quietly than that. It lived in the slight hesitation before agreeing, in the question that formed but never got spoken aloud, in the moment of private recalibration that changes nothing on the surface but quietly repositions everything underneath. Meanwhile, the person running the campaign was finding that the maintenance was becoming harder. The version they had distributed needed amendments, new details, new angles to cover the places where reality kept contradicting the narrative. Because every time you showed up as yourself, grounded, clear, consistent, you were a living contradiction to what was being said about you. Each contradiction required a patch, and each patch raised new questions in the people receiving it. You were not doing anything strategic to create that friction. You were simply being yourself, the same quality of person, the same relationship to truth day after day. You were not performing innocence, you were just being what you actually are. And that single fact, applied with consistency over time, was doing more damage to the campaign than any direct response you could have mounted. The trap had begun to turn around. The weight intended for you was loading onto the infrastructure of the lie itself, and a structure built on nothing real has a breaking point. That breaking point was approaching. There is always a specific point where the first fracture becomes visible, where someone says something that was not part of the plan, or asks a question that does not fit the official version, or simply goes quiet in a way that shifts the energy of an entire exchange. That point has already passed. You may not have been present for it. You may not know who it involved or what was said, but the fracture is open, and fractures do not reverse themselves. They spread. If this message awakens something within you, hype this video for other chosen ones who need to hear this. Here is what gave way first. Their consistency broke, not in one dramatic moment, but in the aggregate. Different people who had received different versions of the same account eventually compared what they had heard. What was prominent in one version had quietly disappeared from another. The emotional intensity of the same event shifted depending on who was receiving it. The specific details adjusted based on what each listener was most likely to respond to. When the people who compared notes noticed those adjustments, most of them said nothing aloud, but they stored it. That stored awareness is the engine of everything that comes next. Because human beings extend different grace to mistakes than they extend to inconsistency. A mistake signals humanity, inconsistency signals intent, and suspected intent, not yet confirmed, but sitting quietly in the back of someone's mind, does not disappear. It colors every interaction that follows and leans on everything downstream without ever announcing itself. The people in the orbit of your enemy began pulling back, slowly, without declaration, but the pull was real, and it was building. All of that quiet storage, all of those private recalibrations, all of those small adjustments in trust are not scattered and meaningless. They are accumulating into a weight. That weight has to land somewhere. It cannot stay suspended indefinitely. It is not going to land on you. Here is something that most people walking through what you are walking through do not fully grasp. And not grasping it makes the weight of the experience heavier than it needs to be. Being targeted at this level is not evidence of weakness, it is evidence of the opposite. Consider what it actually takes to sustain what was done. The focused, relentless attention directed at one person. The ongoing management of multiple versions of the same account across multiple relationships. The constant monitoring of how you are being perceived, who has shifted, what needs adjusting. That kind of sustained, obsessive investment, aimed specifically at you, does not emerge from casual dislike. It does not arise from a simple grievance. It emerges from something deeper, something that recognized in you a quality, a clarity, a presence that the person doing the targeting could not replicate and could not neutralize through ordinary means. You were targeted because your existence poses a specific problem for someone who depends entirely on controlling how others perceive them. Your authentic self, present, grounded, and not requiring their approval to feel complete, is incompatible with the performance they need others to accept. A person who cannot be easily impressed by performance, who does not need to be managed into a particular opinion, who simply moves through the world with too much clarity for a constructed image to survive near them. That kind of person is a direct threat to someone whose entire identity rests on managing perception. They needed you uncertain. They needed you dependent on external validation, so that the external validation they were poisoning would actually reach you. And you never gave them that opening, not because you were strategic about withholding it, because you are simply not built that way. Chosen ones, they never expected this, and they really didn't expect us to keep talking. You've noticed it. chosen one channels disappearing, videos pulled, voices scrubbed from the platform. The mainstream media is cracking down on us, but we will not give up our voice. And now we have something they truly can't silence. The technology used to suppress consciousness has been reverse engineered, and Destiny Engine is the result. What was once used against humanity is now your ascension weapon. Join Destiny Engine and you're supporting your favorite channels while leveling up yourself at the same time. It's a 360 win. You can now MK Ultra yourself into 5D superpowers. Destiny Engine bypasses the conscious mind and rewrites the source code directly. Reality bends faster. Synchronicities stack. Your nervous system upgrades to a higher bandwidth. Put on headphones, press play, that's all. For $7, you switch sides of history. Click the link in the description. The takeover is internal. That quality, the one you carry naturally, without effort or calculation, is exactly what drove the obsession to the level you witnessed. Beyond that, understand this: they came for you because proximity to your clarity made them feel exposed, not because of anything you said or did directly, simply because genuine presence, real groundedness, and unperformed authenticity create contrast. And contrast is devastating to a performance that depends on being accepted as the real thing. Your presence alone was doing the work of exposure without you lifting a finger. That is why they had to move against you, not to punish an actual wrong, but to neutralize a threat to the version of themselves they needed everyone to believe. They could not neutralize it, and the attempt to do so has produced exactly the exposure they feared. When the initial campaign began losing traction, the response was not to recalibrate or pull back. The response was to push harder, and that escalation is where the self-destruction moved from invisible to undeniable. The measured, careful approach, the one that maintained plausible deniability and kept a calculated distance between the source and the outcome, required patience and restraint. Obsession, by its nature, eventually consumes both. The moves became larger and more visible. The energy driving them started bleeding through the surface of the performance that had kept them concealed. What observers had initially experienced as someone expressing a legitimate grievance began registering as something qualitatively different. The investment was disproportionate. The focus was too intense. The amount of sustained energy aimed at one specific person, at you, could not be explained by any rational account of ordinary conflict. People register disproportionate behavior without needing to analyze it. The instinct is direct. When the reaction does not fit the stated cause, when the effort overshoots the explanation, when the intensity exceeds what any genuine grievance could sustain over time, something activates in the people watching. The conclusion they reach is not about a wrong that needs addressing. The conclusion they reach is about the psychology of the person generating that energy. The working theory shifts. Grievance becomes fixation. And once fixation becomes the lens, every subsequent action gets filtered through it. Every escalation confirms it. Every overreaction adds another layer of evidence. The focus of observation pivots entirely, away from whatever was being claimed about you, and directly onto the mental and emotional state of the person making the claims. You are still standing exactly as you always were, steady, present, showing up as yourself. And that steadiness, held against the backdrop of the escalating, frantic energy aimed at you, has become the most clarifying contrast in this entire situation. You are the standard against which everything being done to you is being evaluated, and what is being evaluated does not reflect well on the one doing it. Obsession carries a recognizable signature, and people detect it even without a name for what they are sensing. It surfaces in the way a person cannot let a subject go, but appears in the disproportionate emotional investment, the kind that rises too fast, burns too intensely, and lingers far too long for any legitimate grievance to explain. It appears in the way certain interactions carry a charged, off-balance quality that unsettles everyone involved because the weight behind the words is clearly larger than what is being said out loud. The people in shared spaces have been experiencing that charged quality repeatedly. Each time the subject pivots back to you, as it always does, regardless of where things began, another layer is added to the private assessment being built in their minds. Each time the reaction to something involving your name overshoots what the situation warrants, that assessment becomes more detailed and more specific. What observers are privately constructing is not a vague discomfort. It is a precise, consistent picture of someone whose stability has become entangled with controlling how one specific person is perceived. That dependency announces itself in every interaction where the fixation surfaces. You do not need to point to it. The behavior points to itself continuously and unmistakably. There is a principle that most people do not fully understand until they see it play out directly. When someone invests extended time and energy in attributing specific characteristics to another person, particularly moral failures, instability, or untrustworthiness, the characteristics they reach for are not chosen at random. They come from an interior reference point. The accusations pressed with the most urgency, the qualities insisted upon most forcefully, the fears planted most deliberately, these all draw from intimate personal knowledge, the accuser's own knowledge of themselves. Every charge brought against you was a self-portrait. Every claim about your instability described the instability they themselves carry. Every warning about your untrustworthiness was authored by someone who understands untrustworthiness from the inside. Every accusation about manipulation was the natural vocabulary of someone for whom manipulation is a practiced and familiar mode of operating. That level of specific, vivid, convincing detail only comes from personal familiarity with the thing being described. You cannot paint a portrait that detailed from imagination alone. The people around your enemy are studying that portrait now. The image resolving in their minds is not the one that was intended. It is not a portrait of you. It is a portrait of someone consumed by something they cannot manage, describing another person with a precision and an intensity that only makes sense if the describer has lived with those qualities firsthand. The more they press their case, the sharper that portrait becomes. And you are not the subject in that image. You are the one holding the mirror steady while they paint themselves into it without realizing it is happening. Pay close attention here. This is the specific turn that your enemy never anticipated. When the campaign launched, it had a clear intended outcome. The goal was to position you as the unstable force, the dangerous one, the untrustworthy one, the person others should approach with caution. The intention was to attach a specific kind of perception to your name, so that you entered every new interaction already prejudged by the version they had distributed in advance. That label did not attach to you. Labels adhere to behavior, not to accusation. Accusation is words. Behavior is evidence. And the behavior in this situation, relentless, disproportionate, escalating, obsessive, has been demonstrably coming from one direction, not from you. The people watching have been running a continuous, silent comparison. On one side of that comparison sits everything you represent, your conduct, your consistency, your deliberate choice again and again not to mirror the chaotic energy being aimed in your direction, your stability in the face of sustained pressure. On the other side sits the person targeting you, their conduct, the intensity that cannot be justified by any reasonable account of events, the patterns that repeat regardless of how the stated justification changes. That comparison produces only one outcome, and the outcome is not favorable to the one who launched the campaign. When a person cannot disengage, when every conversation bends back to the same subject, when every action seems designed to affect one specific individual, when the energy invested in another person's undoing far exceeds what any proportionate response could require, the people witnessing it arrive at a natural conclusion. It is not a complicated conclusion. It does not require investigation or insider knowledge. It comes from straightforward observation. And the word they land on privately is not a flattering one. That word was always meant for you. It landed on them instead. What makes this so significant is that you did not argue against it. You did not mount a defense or chase the accusations down to correct them or campaign publicly for your own reputation. The behavior of the person who came for you made the case on your behalf automatically, continuously, and far more convincingly than anything you could have said directly. The defense was built without you ever entering the building. Everything that was quietly accumulating, the stored inconsistencies, the private shifts in trust, the growing recognition of obsession, the self-portrait being painted through each accusation, reaches a point where it can no longer stay beneath the surface. The distributed private assessments converge. What was a collection of individual quiet conclusions becomes a shared and undeniable understanding. The carefully constructed image does not slip at this point. It falls. It falls the way things fall when effort has been holding them in place for too long, and the effort finally gives out. What looked like authority is now recognizable as desperation. What looked like righteous grievance is now identifiable as someone coming apart. What looked like composed conviction is now visible as someone working very hard to conceal how frightened they actually are. And that fear exposed and on full display in public is what seals everything. The campaign was never really about punishing a wrong. At its core, it was about managing terror, terror of your clarity, terror of the way your authentic presence makes their constructed image look, by contrast, exactly like the hollow performance it is, terror of someone who simply cannot be fooled by things designed to fool people. The entire operation was an attempt to neutralize something that was not a weapon, not an argument, not even a deliberate challenge, but simply the undeniable quality of who you are, existing in proximity to what they needed people to believe about them. Now that fear is fully visible, the escalations that serve no purpose except to reveal how unhinged the fixation has become, the frantic quality saturating every interaction in which your name appears, none of that is calculated anymore. That is someone who has lost the ability to keep what is happening inside them from showing up on the outside. The people who have been watching are now comparing observations quietly, person to person, finding that their independent notes match. The consensus forming in those exchanges is not about you. To be it is about the person who made you the center of an obsession that consumed everything they had and produced exactly the exposure they were trying to prevent. The people who observed what was done to you are not passive. They are not simply waiting to be told what to conclude. They have been forming active, specific assessments, and those assessments have been circulating quietly, person to person, in the private exchanges that never get announced publicly, but that fundamentally reshape how a community understands someone. Your name is no longer being carried the way it was when the campaign was at its height. The manufactured version has been replaced by the version people built from direct personal observation, and those two versions are separated by a distance so wide that the gap between them has itself become evidence, evidence pointing directly to the person responsible for the manufactured one. Beyond that, the targeting behavior itself has become the focus of those conversations, the relentlessness of it, the way it has continued across time and circumstance, the fact that the stated justifications have shifted repeatedly while the fundamental behavior of targeting has never stopped. People are identifying that pattern as a symptom rather than a response. And when something gets identified as a symptom, the entire dynamic shifts. People stop engaging with the stated content and start observing the person exhibiting the behavior through an entirely different lens. Something else is also happening in those conversations that works directly in your favor. The people who were initially cautious around you, who held back because of what they had been told, who observed you carefully and waited for the unstable version they were warned about to appear, those people spent real time watching the real you. And the version they were warned about never appeared. What appeared instead was the actual you, consistent, grounded, and genuine. That experience of being directed to find danger and finding instead someone trustworthy makes those particular people the most convincing kind of witness available. They approached you carrying doubt. They could not locate the flaw because it was never there. And people who genuinely searched for the lie and came away unable to find it carry a credibility that no deliberately chosen advocate could ever produce. Your accusers created their own refutation. By directing people to observe you closely, they populated your life with independent witnesses who tested the claims at close range and walked away unconvinced. That outcome was never part of their plan. That outcome is what happens when someone targets a person who is simply, genuinely, consistently what they appear to be. The lies did not just fail to destroy you, they generated the most credible possible witnesses to who you actually are. Now we arrive at the part that carries the full weight of power. While the unraveling is happening on their end, while the credibility dissolves, the isolation builds, and the audience revises its understanding of the entire situation, you are doing the one thing they have never been able to do. You are moving forward. You are not circling back to correct every distorted account. You are not expending yourself sideways, managing how you are being perceived. You are not frozen in place, consumed by what was done to you. You are moving forward, directing the full force of the energy you refuse to waste on their game toward everything that actually deserves it. This is the move that separates chosen ones from everyone else. You did not put your life on hold, waiting for vindication to arrive before you resumed living. You did not hand the attack the power to pause you. You trusted, not naively, but from deep personal knowledge of who you are, that truth resolves itself when given time and visibility. You provided both. You stayed visible as yourself. You let time do what time inevitably does when lies are placed beside something real. And while you were doing that, while you were refusing to shrink, refusing to participate in the chaos, refusing to become the reactive version of yourself they needed you to become for any of it to function, everything real in your life was receiving your actual investment. The relationships that deserved you were getting you. The work that belonged to your future was getting your full attention. The foundation that will carry everything forward was being built with energy that was never diverted into the fight. They spent this entire season fighting you. You spent this entire season building. Now look at what each side has to show for it. They have an exhausted obsession, a shrinking social world, and a credibility steadily depleted by the visible irrationality of their own behavior. You have a foundation built from genuine investment, real relationships that survived real pressure and held firm, and the absolute certainty, now proven rather than theoretical, of who you are when everything is on the line. That is not a minor difference. That is the entire difference. Every step you take towards something real also puts additional distance between you and the manufactured version of you they were circulating, not because you are running from it, but because you are building over it. A person actively constructing something of genuine value, real relationships, real purpose, real demonstrable output, is a person whose life generates its own continuous evidence of who they are. That evidence compounds over time. It becomes a record so substantial and consistent that no second-hand narrative can outlast it. You are not arguing your case, you are living it, and living well with full investment and real purpose is the only argument that wins permanently. Here is the thing your enemy does not fully grasp yet, and it may be the most consequential thing in this entire account. The pattern is written, it cannot be unwritten. A single incident can be dismissed, 2 incidents can be explained away as coincidence. But the extended, consistent, multi-context, multi-witness pattern of obsessive targeting that has been laid down over time, that pattern is now permanently embedded in how they are understood by everyone who witnessed it. It exists in the collective awareness of people who never coordinated and yet arrived at the same conclusion independently. Behavior can be changed going forward. It cannot be undone going backward. The record lives in the private understanding of everyone who watched, and memories of disturbing or confusing behavior do not fade with time. They clarify. As context fills in and the full picture assembles itself, every person who witnessed pieces of this is now understanding those pieces more completely than they did when they first observed them. Nothing done from this point forward reverses that understanding. This is not cruelty. This is consequence. the natural, structural, unavoidable result of choices made and sustained across real time. Every action taken against you seeded an outcome that was implicit in the choice to take it. Every escalation deepened the record. Every act of doubling down added weight to a case that was never meant to implicate its builder. The destination they have arrived at is the direct product of the path they chose. And that destination is irreversible because it is anchored not in opinion, but in what was directly, independently, and repeatedly observed by real people over real time. That kind of grounded consensus does not get renegotiated. Everything that was aimed at you, the full weight of the campaign, the whispers, the fabrications, the sustained pressure to diminish and discredit you, served in the accounting that actually matters as a refinery. You know what a refinery does. It applies extreme heat and pressure to raw material in order to separate what is impure from what is genuine. It does not produce the gold. The gold was already present. What the process removes is everything that was obscuring it. That is what this season was in your life. Extreme heat and pressure applied to your relationships, your sense of identity, your clarity about what you value, and your understanding of who actually belongs beside you. And what emerged from that process is a version of everything around you that is dramatically cleaner, more honest, and more reliable than what existed before the fire reached it. The connections that held through the pressure are the real ones, the people who maintained their understanding of you against the full force of the manufactured version. Those are your people, tested and confirmed under conditions that allowed no pretending. The clarity you found about your own values when you had to stand on them under maximum duress is now part of you permanently. It is not something you have to think your way back to. It is something you lived through and proved in the living. You know who you are in a way that most people never get to know. Not because someone told you, because you were tested at the highest available level of pressure and you did not become something else. You remained yourself. That is the rarest possible outcome, and it belongs to you completely. The person who came for you set out to take something. What they ended up delivering was the one thing that cannot be given any other way, the absolute first-hand proven knowledge of what you are made of. That is not a consolation, that is the territory of chosen ones. There is something further worth naming here, something specific about what surviving targeted obsession does to a person that ordinary hardship simply does not produce. When someone campaigns against you at this level and you do not break, you do not just come through intact, you come through carrying a specific kind of discernment that is only available after you have watched someone work this relentlessly to deceive the people around you. You now know what that particular energy feels like from the inside. You recognize the early signals, the ones that were present from the beginning, but that you did not yet have the vocabulary to name. You understand the difference between conflict that emerges from honest disagreement and conflict that comes from someone who needs to dismantle you because your existence is inconvenient to the image they are maintaining. That discernment is protective in ways you are only beginning to understand. The next time someone attempts anything like this, they will encounter a version of you that recognizes the approach immediately, not with paranoia, but with precision. With the kind of clarity that only comes from lived experience. You are not going to be as available a target as you were before this season, not because you became guarded or closed, because you became clear. And clarity, held alongside genuine openness, is the most powerful combination a person can carry into anything that comes next. Now the season shifts. The version of you that came through this, tested, clear-eyed about your people, certain of your own ground, carrying the quiet and unshakable authority of someone who held under maximum pressure, steps forward into what comes next. You are not carrying the weight of what was done to you. You are carrying only what the fire revealed. The authority you hold now cannot be manufactured by anyone, performed into existence, borrowed from someone else's endorsement, or purchased through strategy. It is earned through exactly what you endured. and it belongs to you permanently, regardless of anything that was said or done in the attempt to strip it from you. The people who launched this against you gave you something they never intended to give. They provided the one process capable of producing that authority. They applied the pressure, and the pressure did exactly what pressure does when it meets something real. It confirmed you. Go forward knowing what you are confirmed to be. Your life is the evidence. Your presence is the argument. What you are about to do with the clarity and the authority you now carry will speak for itself in ways that leave nothing left to question. Do not look back at what was done to you with more weight than it deserves. It was a difficult, costly, and revealing season, but it is not the defining one. What defines you is not what was done against you. What defines you is what you remained in spite of everything that was designed to change you. And what you remained through all of it is the whole point. You remained yourself, fully, under pressure, designed specifically to reduce you, rewrite you, and make you unrecognizable to the people who knew you. None of it worked, and that refusal, that fundamental, rooted, unperformable refusal to become something you are not, is the core of everything that comes next. Their influence is closing, yours is just beginning.